Welcome back to Maths with Mrs. J. I wanted to do a bit of general information about graphing. A lot of people seem to think that every new function they learn is a completely new ball game as far as graphing is concerned. And that, for example, when you learn about quadratics, that you need to learn specific details about how a quadratic is changed by different parts of this formula. What I'd like you to understand is that in actual fact, all graphs have a lot of things in common. If you know what their basic shape looks like, and you can have some understanding as to what adding a constant might do, or multiplying the function might do, then you're a big step ahead whenever you learn about a new function, because you can already visualize and understand how that function might be adjusted. For example, if you take your very, very basic straight line, y equals x, if you add c, you're moving that whole thing up by c. The same thing happens whether it's a straight line, a parabola, a sine curve, a hyperbola, a cubic function. If you add a constant to that original function, it shifts it up. If you subtract a constant, of course, it shifts it down. If you multiply the main focus of the equation by a number, you make that steeper if the number is greater than 1, or you turn it upside down if it's negative. If you multiply it by a fraction, you make it less steep. For example, take this basic parabola. If I were to multiply that by 2, I'm going to get a steeper parabola, which is going to look like a skinnier parabola. If I multiply that by a half, I'm going to get a less steep parabola, or a fatter parabola, shall we say. I'm not fat shaming the parabola. If I were to multiply that by -1, I'm turning it upside down. Same thing with a sine curve. If I multiply that by a number, I'm going to make it get steeper, and therefore the amplitude will change. Okay, same thing here. If I multiply this, it will be steeper. So there are two changes that we've talked about. Another change that we talk about, if we do something with the x, so if we have, instead of just an x, if we had an x minus a, what's that going to do? Well, it's actually going to shift everything a to the right. If a is negative, then of course it shifts it to the left. Doesn't matter what the graph is. Even this one here, 1 over x minus a, these asymptotes here, this one will move across by a to x equals a. Okay, and the whole thing would be shifted across to the right. Okay, and in terms of periodic functions like sine of x, if you put a number in front of the x here rather than right outside the front of the function, it will affect how quickly it repeats itself. There are lots of things you can learn about graphs. When you learn about different types of functions, try to see the similarities and try to see how it all relates to each other, rather than seeing every single new function as a completely different kettle of fish, because it's not. Okay, and if you can have some understanding as to how you change these basic graphs with just little things like multiplying your x squared, or if you had a y equals x squared minus, or sorry, x minus a all squared, it moves it all to the right, that sort of thing, you'll be a big step ahead.